Hello, dear learners. At the very outset, I would like to welcome you all to this MOOC on Gender and the Media. This is the 13th unit of the module on Media Text and Representation, Part 1. This particular unit is on Media Agenda on Gender Issues. In this module, you'll be able to gain an understanding of the pivotal role played by media text in influencing socio-cultural narratives and the paradigm shifts that is taking place in media. We will also explore the field of journalism and the disparities within the profession that has affected women. A careful understanding of this unit will help you to gain insight on what media text is, its characteristics, and its importance. Explore how gender is represented in media through text and images. Interrogate the question of gender dynamics in journalism, and understand the concept of agenda setting in media and the factors that influence it. Let us first try to understand what is a text in general and in the context of media. A text is a unit of meaning for interpretation and understanding. Within media studies, a text could be a TV program, film, video game, website, book, song, podcast, newspaper article, tweet, or app. Text matters because they are bearers of communication and movers of meaning. Texts can be inspiring or disgusting and disappointing, but more importantly, they intervene in the world and into culture, introducing new ideas or variously attacking or reinforcing old ones. Media texts and their representations play a pivotal role in shaping societal perceptions and cultural narratives. They function not only as a conduits of information but also as powerful tools for constructing and disseminating ideologies. Media texts encompass a wide array of content forms, including films, television programs, advertisements, news articles, and social media posts. These texts are encoded with messages that audience decode, often influenced by their social, cultural, and personal context. Stuart Hall's encoding-decoding model of 1980 provides a foundational framework for understanding this interaction. According to Hall, media producers encode texts with preferred meanings, but audiences may decode this text in dominant, negotiated, or oppositional ways, reflecting a spectrum of interpretive possibilities. Media texts are structured and convey values in ways that reflect cultural, social, and communicative frameworks, especially within the context of intercultural communication. Media texts are often arranged in narratives, arguments, or informational formats to align with cultural communication styles. The choice of language, metaphors, and visual symbols in media texts reflects cultural norms and values. Media texts often adapt their language to the intended audience, considering linguistic diversity and cultural idioms. Media texts often promote and reinforce cultural identity by showcasing traditional practices, historical narratives, or shared values. They serve as tools for cultural preservation or adaptation in a globalized context. Media texts frequently balance global values, for example, individualism, consumerism, with localized cultural norms. This interplay can lead to hybrid identities, where audiences navigate global trends while maintaining cultural roots. Media texts are vehicles for disseminating ideological values such as democracy, equality, or consumerism. They can promote dominant ideologies or provide platforms for marginalized voices and alternative viewpoint. Media texts are powerful tools for intercultural communication, offering structured narratives that convey values and influence cultural perceptions. Understanding their structure and embedded values is crucial for fostering cultural sensitivity, promoting inclusivity, and ensuring equitable representation in a globalized world. Understanding these characteristics help analyze how media texts communicate message, shape perceptions, and influence societal attitudes. Recognizing their constructed nature empowers audiences to critically engage with media. Let us next try to understand what representation in context of media studies imply. Representation refers to the process through which media texts depict people, events, and ideas. It is inherently selective and often reflects the power structures within society. Media representations shape how audiences perceive gender, race, class, sexuality, and other identity markers. Scholars such as Roland Barthes in his 1972 work have argued that these representations are laden with myths, cultural connotations that naturalize specific ideologies. ideologies. Scholars such as Roland Barthes have argued that these representations are laden with myths, cultural connotations that naturalize specific ideologies. Media text and their representations are not neutral. They are deeply embedded in societal power structures and cultural dynamics. By critically engaging with media text, audiences can become more aware of the ideologies they propagate and the implications they hold for identity and social relations. As media continues to evolve in the digital age, the study of representation remains crucial for fostering a more inclusive and equitable society. The interplay between producers, texts, and audiences underscores the transformative potential of media as both a mirror and a shaper of the world we inhabit. For instance, media portrayals of gender have historically reinforced stereotypes. Women are frequently depicted in passive roles or as objects of desire, while men are often shown as dominant and authoritative. Feminist media theorists, including Laura Mulvey, critique this male gaze, highlighting how visual media perpetuates patriarchal norms. Similarly, racial representation in media has been a site of contention. Edward Said's concept of Orientalism illustrates how Western media constructs the East as exotic, backward, and inferior, perpetuating colonialist ideologies. Contemporary critics focus on issues like the underrepresentation of people of color in leading roles and the perpetuation of harmful stereotypes such as the black criminal or the Asian model minority. The representations embedded in media text have profound social and psychological effects. Cultivation theory, for example, proposed by George Gerbner and Larry Gross, posits that long-term exposure to media content can shape individuals' perceptions of reality. For example, audiences who consume violent media may perceive the world as more dangerous than it actually is, a phenomenon known as the mean world syndrome. Moreover, media representations influence identity formation. The social identity theory suggests that individuals derive a sense of self from their group membership. Positive representations of marginalized groups can foster pride and solidarity, while negative portrayal can reinforce stigma and internalized oppression. Several critical frameworks helped understand and analyze media text and representation. These approaches underscore the importance of deconstructing media text to uncover hidden ideologies and promote equitable representations. Feminist media studies approach examine how media perpetuates or challenges gender inequalities. This framework analyzes media text and representations by focusing on how gender, power, and inequality are constructed, maintained, or challenged in media content and production. It critiques the way media reinforce patriarchal norms, gender stereotypes, and traditional roles, while also exploring how media can empower marginalized voices and promote gender equity. The post-colonialism critique explores the legacy of colonialism in media representations of race and ethnicity. This framework analyzes media text and representations by examining how colonial histories, ideologies, and power dynamics continue to shape cultural narratives and identity formations in contemporary media. It critiques the way media reinforces or challenges colonial legacies, offering a lens to interrogate power relations between the global North and South, dominant and marginalized cultures, and colonial and post-colonial subjects. The queer theory investigates the portrayal of LGBTQ plus identities in media text and challenges heteronormative narratives. Originating from post-structuralist thought, feminist theory, and LGBTQ plus activism, it deconstructs binaries like male, female, heterosexual, homosexual, and normal, abnormal. When applied to media text, queer theory focuses on uncovering how these works reinforce, challenge, or complicate traditional understandings of identity and power. The critical race theory analyzes the intersection of race, power, and media and provides a framework for analyzing media text and representations by focusing on the ways race, racism, and power dynamics are embedded in cultural narratives. Critical race theory's approach to media analysis involves unpacking how media perpetuates, challenges, or reshapes racial ideologies and social hierarchies. Media often reflects social power structures. It plays a pivotal role in shaping cultural understanding of gender. A feminist analysis explores the issues like who holds the position of power within the media industries, whose perspective dominates the narratives. A feminist framework looks into the representation of women in media by asking questions as how are women depicted and what stereotypes are perpetuated or subverted. Media increasingly promotes a self-surveillance culture, particularly for women who are encouraged to constantly monitor and modify their appearance to conform to idealized beauty standards. Some of the common patterns include objectification, where women are portrayed primarily as sexual objects for the male gaze, for example, fragmented body shots or hypersexualization. The other form is stereotyping, where women are confined to reductive roles, for example, the damsel in distress, the femme fatale, and the nurturing mother, amongst others. The other form is agency. Do female characters have complexity, autonomy, and the ability to influence the plot? A feminist framework looks into the issues of intersectionality with questions as how do race, class, sexuality, ability, and other identities intersect with gender representation? Gender cannot be understood in isolation from race, class, sexuality, and other social categories. Intersectional feminist analysis avoids treating women as monolithic category and considers representation of women of color, LGBTQIA+ individuals, disabled women, and women from various socioeconomic backgrounds. A feminist framework for media analysis critiques not only the representations within media text but also the structural and cultural context that shapes those representations. It demands inclusivity, challenges systemic inequities, and advocates for diverse and empowering portrayals of all genders. Feminist analysis extends to examining the depictions of toxic masculinity, example men as unemotional, aggressive, or dominant, and inclusion of diverse masculinities that allow for vulnerability, nurturing, and emotional depth. Feminist analysis extends to examining the production and industry practices by asking questions as to who gets to tell the stories and how does that impact representation. It examines gender disparity in roles where men take up creative roles, for example, that of directors, screenwriters, editors. It also examines the hiring practices and inclusion of women and marginalized gender in all aspects of media production. Let us now move to the gendered politics of journalism. The field of journalism as both a profession and a cultural institution reflects and perpetuates the broader power dynamics of society, including gender inequalities. The gendered politics of journalism examines how gender shapes the production, representation, and consumption of news. This discourse explores the structural barriers within journalism, the representation of gender in media content, and the implication of democratic engagement and social justice, drawing on key theories and empirical studies. Historically, journalism has been a male-dominated profession with women excluded or relegated to soft news beats such as lifestyle, fashion, or education. Even as women entered newsrooms in greater numbers in the mid-20th century, they often faced systemic discrimination, including unequal pay, limited career advancement opportunities, and sexual harassment. Despite progress, gender disparities persist in contemporary journalism. Research indicates that women remain underrepresented in leadership positions in media organizations. A 2021 report by the International Women's Media Foundation found only 27% of top management roles in global newsrooms were occupied by women. Additionally, women journalists frequently encounter a glass ceiling, limiting their access to high-profile assignments or decision-making roles. These disparities are compounded by intersectional factors such as race, ethnicity, and class. The representation of gender in journalism often reflects social stereotypes and reinforce patriarchal norms. Feminist media scholars have highlighted the prevalence of gender bias in news coverage, which can manifest in several ways. Some of the ways of these manifestations are underrepresentation of women as news subjects. Studies reveal that women are consistently underrepresented as news subjects, experts, and sources. The Global Media Monitoring Project reported in 2020 that only 25% of news stories featured women, often portraying them in stereotypical roles. The other aspect is gendered framing. Women in leadership or politics are frequently subject to gendered framing where their appearances, marital status, or emotions are emphasized over their policies or professional achievements. For instance, media coverage of female politicians often focus on their clothing or parenting choices, perpetuating a double standard. The other aspect is perpetuation of gender stereotypes. News content often reinforce traditional gender roles, portraying men as active agents and women as passive subjects. This binary framing marginalizes non-binary and gender non-conforming individuals who are largely invisible in mainstream journalism. The digital age has transformed journalism, offering opportunities to challenge traditional power structures and gendered inequities. Women journalists frequently face online harassment, including threats of violence and sexual assault. This digital misogyny creates a chilling effect, deterring women from participating fully in public discourse. Empirical studies reveal that women journalists of color and those reporting on feminist or progressive issues are particularly targeted. Such harassment undermines press freedom and restricts diverse perspectives in journalism. Several theoretical frameworks provide insights into the gendered politics of journalism. Feminist political economy. This approach examines how capitalist media structures reinforce gender inequalities, emphasizing the intersection of economic power and gendered labor practices. Critical discourse analysis. This method analyzes how language and narratives in journalism perpetuate or challenge gender norms. Intersectionality. Building on Crenshaw's work, this perspective explores how overlapping identities such as gender, race, and class shape experiences in journalism. The gendered politics of journalism underscores the need for critical engagement with the structures, practices, and representation within the media landscape. By addressing systemic inequities and challenging stereotypes, journalism can better fulfill its democratic role as a platform for diverse voices and perspectives. As society continues to grapple with issues of equity and inclusion, the interrogation of gender dynamics in journalism remains a crucial endeavor for scholars, practitioners, and policymakers alike. Journalism is changing along with the role of women in the workplace, but not in harmony. The digital revolution means journalists can work from anywhere, but what is sometimes viewed as electronic cottage may also become the electronic cage. The drive in 1980s for female audiences to fulfill advertising targets benefited women journalists who were hired to provide a diet of softer lifestyles and feature journalism. This has prompted an ongoing debate about the feminization of journalism. There are still enduring stereotypes. Women predominate on the lifestyle pages but do not feature much in crime or sport. They are also far likely to be seen on the front page. There is disproportionate lack of female sources, female experts, and even women considered as a newsworthy subject, except when they are victims or royal. But the digital whirlwind has also created new opportunities and new forms of journalism, and this is where women have flourished. They can leave full-time journalism and work from home as freelancers. When they enter existing structures, they tend to be less successful. There is still evidence of a boys' club, and usually where there is a less transparent process within a corporate hierarchy, then women lose out. In the traditional structures of journalism, there are many junior women who find no clear path of advancement. The same issues recur that have been discussed for over a generation, ever since equal employment rights became a political reality. A number of exceptional individuals have achieved, but this has not transformed the culture. Even where the numbers are low, as in the regional press, and discrimination between male and female employees is a reality. Even where the numbers are low, as in the regional press, discrimination between male and female employees is a reality. In fact, women report that too many times their goals are stifled long before they even have a chance to flourish. Though women are well represented in the media, their voices are largely unheard. They are supposed to report on the predicaments of society at large, but when it comes to themselves, they are seldom heard. Women journalists clearly have made great advances in the last 2 decades. Their share of jobs in all media has increased. They are not restricted to fashion, cookery, art, and culture, but are also reporting from battlefields, stock market, and the Parliament's press gallery. Gender plays a significant role in shaping the experience of journalists and the broader journalism industry. The journalism industry has been male-dominated, particularly in the leadership positions such as editors, news directors, and publishers. Women are underrepresented in decision-making, which affect the range of stories covered and perspectives presented. Gender may affect how journalists are received in certain cultural or professional contexts. For example, women reports may struggle to gain access to male-dominated spaces or male sources in conservative societies. A lack of gender diversity in newsroom may result in coverage that overlooks or marginalizes issues affecting women and other gender minorities. Gender biases in the newsroom can also shape how stories are told, perpetuating stereotypes or excluding voices that challenge societal norms. Women journalists often face disparities in pay compared to their male counterparts, even for equivalent roles and experience levels. Gender biases may limit women's career growth with fewer opportunities for promotion or assignments in high-profile beats. Women in freelance journalism may experience instability and lack access to benefits or legal protection, making them more vulnerable to exploitation. Women journalists frequently face sexual harassment both in the workplace and while reporting in the field. This can create hostile work environments and force talented journalists out of the industry. Female journalists are disproportionately targeted by online abuse, including threats and gender-based insults. This digital harassment can have several mental health impacts and deter women from reporting on controversial or sensitive topics. Women reporters, especially those covering conflict zones, face unique safety risks, including sexual violence and discrimination from source or communities they report on. Women journalists often face skepticism about their competence, authority, particularly in traditionally male-dominated beats like politics, economics, and sports. Male-dominated newsroom may fail to prioritize stories centered on women's experience or include women's experts, sources, and subjects in news coverage. Coverage of gender-related issues may be influenced by the gender dynamics of the newsroom, potentially leading to biased or incomplete storytelling. Gender politics in journalism remains a critical issue that shapes the industry structures and content. Addressing these disparities requires systemic reform and a commitment to fostering inclusivity and equity. By embracing diverse perspectives, journalism can better fulfill its democratic mission of representing and informing society in all its complexities. However, the growing presence of women in journalism has led to more nuanced and comprehensive coverage of issues like gender equality, reproductive rights, and sexual harassment. Women journalists have played a critical role in creating platforms for the underrepresented voice, challenging industry norms, and advocating for equitable practices. Let us now try to understand what is media agenda setting. Media agenda setting, also referred to as agenda building, is a concept in communication studies that explains how media influences public perceptions and prioritization of issues. The theory posits that while media may not tell people what to think, it is highly effective in telling people what to think about. Media agenda setting is a process by which media determines the importance of specific issues, events, or topics through the frequency and prominence of their coverage. Agenda building extends this concept by emphasizing the collaborative process among media, policymakers, and public stakeholders to construct an agenda. In the first level of agenda setting, media coverage highlights certain issues, leading audiences to perceive those issues as more important. In the next level, media influences how audiences think about an issue by framing it with specific tones, perspectives, or attributes. Agenda building highlights the reciprocal relationship between media, public, and policymakers. Each influences the other in shaping societal priorities. For example, media draws attention to issues based on public interest or political relevance. Policymakers use media coverage to gauge public opinion and set policy priorities. The public's reaction to media and political action can further reinforce or shift the agenda. Let us try to understand what are the mechanisms of agenda setting. Issues are repeatedly and consistently pushed by media for public consumption, and it is perceived as significant by the public. In a similar fashion, issues or stories are placed strategically, for example, in the front page or prime-time coverage, to signal their importance. Very often, the angle or context in which an issue is presented affects how it is understood. For instance, climate change can be framed as a scientific issue, an economic concern, or a political debate. Gatekeeping is another aspect of agenda setting where the journalists and editors decide which issues to cover and which to present. Agenda setting helps in shaping public opinion and perception. For example, election campaigns heavily rely on media agenda setting. Similarly, policymakers often respond to media coverage that amplifies public concerns, leading to the prioritization of specific policy areas. The media spotlight on social movements, for example, the Me Too movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, demonstrates how agenda setting can influence societal discourse and drive collective action. Media agenda setting remains a critical framework for understanding the relationship between media, public opinion, and policy making. In an increasingly fragmented digital media environment, the dynamics of agenda building are evolving, emphasizing the collaborative, interactive nature of issue prioritization. Understanding this process is essential for navigating contemporary media and its impact on society. The news media agenda is shaped by multiple influences that determine which issues receive attention and how they are framed. Let's discuss some of the primary factors that influence the media agenda. First is government and political actors. Political actors like politicians, policymakers, and government institutions often influence the media agenda by providing press release, holding press conferences, or using official statements to highlight specific issues. The other factor that influence the media agenda are large corporations and public relation firms, which drive the media coverage through their strategic messaging, advertising, or subject matter experts, think tanks, and research institutions, providing authoritative insights shaping how topics are discussed in media. Advocacy groups and non-governmental organizations also highlight specific social, environmental, or political issues to gain media traction. High-profile leaks of confidential information by whistleblowers such as the Pentagon Papers or WikiLeaks can profoundly impact the news agenda. Large corporations and public relation firms also drive media coverage through their strategic messaging and advertising. Media outlets often influence each other. Prominent news organizations such as wire services like Reuters often set the agenda that smaller outlets follow. In a competitive media environment, outlets also monitor each other's coverage and replicate trending topics to attract audiences. Trending topics on platforms like Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok often direct mainstream media attention towards viral stories or hashtags. Journalistic norms and traditions also influence news agenda. Journalists often prioritize scripts or stories based on its worthiness and values such as timelines, proximity, conflict, human interest, and prominence. Unexpected events like natural disasters, political crises, pandemics, coups, political events, or even death of a celebrated figure in media influence the setting of an agenda. The news media agenda is shaped by a dynamic interplay of external and internal factors, including influential sources, peer media, professional norms, unexpected events, and audience feedback. Understanding these influences highlights the complexities of how information is prioritized and disseminated, providing critical insight into the media role in shaping public discourse. Let us try to understand the role media can play in setting new agenda at this critical juncture. Media has recently started embracing feminist ideals, challenging traditional portrayals, and promoting gender equality. This shift reflects societal changes and the growing demand for inclusive and empowering media. From celebrating women in leadership roles, sports, and other domains traditionally dominated by men, media has now shifted its lenses where it challenges gender norms and addresses toxic masculinity by showcasing traditional notions of masculinity by portraying men as caregivers, emotionally expressive, and supportive partners. However, despite the shifts, critics argue that some media co-opt feminist ideals as a marketing strategy without genuinely supporting gender equality. This phenomenon, referred to as femvertising, can reduce feminism to a sales tactic in the field of advertising, for example. Similarly, media, while highlighting diversity, often fail to represent the marginalized groups adequately, such as women of color, disabled individuals, or those from lower socioeconomic background. The focus on surface-level empowerment like appearance-related messages rather than addressing deeper systemic issues like pay inequality or workplace discrimination thus fails to promote feminist agenda. With this, as we have covered all the sub-themes included in this particular unit, we come to the end of this discussion. Thank you.